I showed up to the barbecue after 4 years away. No one looked up. No one said my name. I sat beneath the same maple tree where we used to open presents and spill lemonade as kids, and it was like I didn't exist. Then my sister dropped an envelope. A government form, CIA clearance. My name was already on it, signed, used. Turns out they'd been using me for years, quietly, repeatedly, without a word. This time they needed my signature, but they forgot who I've become. And I didn't come back to disappear again. Have you ever felt like your silence was more valuable to others than your presence? If this hit a nerve, keep listening. And if it reminded you of anything from your own story, I'm always here. The comments are open. From the sidewalk, I could hear them before I even saw the yard. Laughter rolled over the fence like smoke, light and easy, as if time had never moved on. I slowed my steps, one hand tightening around the strap of my purse. 4 years away, and no one even knew I was coming. I wasn't sure it mattered. The Dawson house looked the same. White siding with blue shutters, flags stuck in the flower beds for Memorial Day weekend, and the same wind chimes clattering in the sticky Virginia air. I paused at the gate. It was like watching a play through the slats in the fence, every role perfectly cast. Dad stood at the grill, spatula in hand, shirt pressed even though it was pushing 80 degrees. His voice boomed over everyone else's, filling the backyard like a marching band. Mom was moving between tables, refilling paper cups with lemonade, smiling tightly the way she always did when she wanted things to stay calm. And in the center of it all, Maddie. Maddie was radiant, just like she was at 27, with her neat ponytail and that crisp white dress that somehow stayed clean even when a streak of barbecue sauce found its way onto everyone else. She was talking to a small cluster of neighbors, laughing at something one of them said. You'd think she had been born to stand in the middle of any circle, drawing the light toward herself. I stood there too long, pretending to study the flag bunting on the fence, while my heart tried to decide whether to beat fast or slow. The scent of grilled burgers and sweet corn hung in the humid air. Kids I didn't recognize darted past with sparklers still unlit, their sneakers thudding on the deck boards. Someone turned up a country song on a Bluetooth speaker. It was a perfect slice of suburbia. Only I was the one that didn't belong. I finally opened the gate. Nobody looked up. The grass felt springy under my sandals as I crossed the yard, dodging folding chairs and red, white, and blue coolers. I chose a spot beneath the maple tree, on one of those plastic chairs that always pinched the backs of your legs. No one waved. Mom glanced at me once, then hurried back toward the grill with a tray of potato salad. They weren't cruel in the obvious way. That would have been easier. It was the soft indifference that hurt more than anything, the way people looked through me like I'd never been gone. Dad clanged the spatula against the lid of the grill and called everyone over. "Folks," he said, clearing his throat with that old confidence that always made people listen. "Before we eat, I want to raise a glass to someone who has made this family proud." All heads turned toward Maddie. "She's about to start something incredible," he continued, his chest swelling as though he himself had been accepted. "The CIA doesn't take just anyone. It takes grit. It takes brains. And our Maddie's got both." The neighbors clapped. Someone whistled. I stared at the condensation dripping from the lemonade cup in my hand. I didn't know if anyone noticed I was sitting there or if they thought I was just some friend of a friend who'd wandered in. Maddie ducked her head like she was shy, though I knew better. That move was part of her, just like her ability to know when to let the light hit her. "Some of us," she said sweetly, "keep moving forward no matter what." The words weren't loud, but they landed like a dart. A few people laughed, not catching the edge in her tone. My father smiled as if she had made a clever toast. I looked away, blinking at the patch of ground between my sandals. All the while, I kept my hands tight on the cup so no one would see them shake. And that's when the envelope slid from her tote bag. It hit the patio with a quiet slap, a manila envelope, heavy with papers, the flap coming open as it skidded on the wood. My eyes went to it before I could stop myself. Clear as day, I saw the top sheet, sponsorship request for national security clearance. And under authorized sponsor, my name. For a moment, everything else, Dad's voice, the sizzle of the grill, the music, fell away. The heat pressed at the back of my neck. I reached down and picked up the envelope before Maddie even noticed. "Thanks," she said absent-mindedly, sliding it back into her bag without looking. But I'd already seen enough. As soon as the burgers were handed out and people started filling paper plates with corn and potato salad, I stood. I brushed the grass from my skirt and walked toward the gate. I'd almost made it when Maddie's voice cut through. "Claire!" She hurried after me, barefoot on the grass, the manila envelope clutched to her chest now. For once, there was panic in her voice. "Wait, please, just listen," she said, breathless. "I didn't tell Dad. He wouldn't understand. They need someone trustworthy to sign for me, and it has to be you. You're the only one who—" I turned and the words caught in my throat. Her face was flushed, eyes too bright. The same little sister who used to follow me around with scraped knees, looking for approval. I reached for the form, folded it once, twice, careful not to tear it. "You called me useless," I said quietly. "Now you need me." The crowd in the yard was still laughing, plates of burgers balanced on their knees, unaware that something had just shifted. I opened the gate with my free hand and stepped through, the wood creaking as it swung shut behind me. The last thing I saw before I turned away was Maddie, barefoot in the grass, holding her breath as if that might keep me from leaving. I set the envelope on my kitchen table like it might go off if I touched it too quickly. For the first few minutes after I got home, I just stood there staring at it, my keys still dangling from my hand. The laughter from that backyard felt like it had followed me here, echoing in the thin walls of this apartment. My place is small, just a one-bedroom on the second floor of a brick building that hasn't seen fresh paint since before I moved in. There's a dent in the doorframe I've stopped noticing, and the carpet carries the memory of other people's lives. Most days I'm fine with that. Tonight it all seemed so bare, like the room was showing me everything I hadn't built. I dropped my purse on the couch and sat at the table. The form Maddie had pushed at me was staring back, the bold black letters across the top spelling out words I wished I could unsee. Sponsorship request for national security clearance. I picked it up and held it, not reading, just feeling the weight. Then I set it down and slid my phone across the table, scrolling through a half-dozen search results. Clearance, sponsorship, misuse, penalty. Can someone use my name without my knowledge? Family clearance, fraud consequences. Each link felt heavier than the last. Words like felony, federal offense, and career termination leapt off the screen. The more I read, the tighter my stomach got. I'd walked away from the Army years ago, but I still knew how serious those forms could be. I leaned back and looked around my apartment. The fridge hummed in the kitchen. A few unopened bills sat in a neat stack on the counter, the way I always left them, promising myself I'd take care of them on my next paycheck. In the freezer, I knew there were 3 microwavable dinners, all the same brand because it's easier that way. On the wall across from me, taped up with worn blue painter's tape, was a photograph of my unit. 20 people standing shoulder to shoulder in the desert sun, dust on our boots, arms around one another like family. That was 2015. Back when I thought the word family meant the same thing in every place. A chill crept in as another memory came with that year. Thanksgiving, 2015. Maddie had slid a thin folder across the table while pie was being passed around. "It's just some harmless paperwork," she'd said, all casual. "You don't even need to read it. You know how Dad likes to keep things tidy." I'd been tired, just back from a long deployment, still smelling of jet fuel and desert air. I didn't read a word, just signed and handed it back. Dad had smiled and ruffled her hair, telling her she could always count on family. That was the last big holiday I spent in that house. I pressed my thumb against the manila edge of the envelope on my table now, as if maybe the paper could tell me whether I'd just walked into something years ago without realizing it. My phone buzzed once, then again. It was Jasmine. I hadn't talked to her in months, but she was the only person who came to mind. We'd served together for 3 years. She'd been a legal officer in our unit, sharp as a tack, able to quote military law like some people recite song lyrics. I hesitated only a second before hitting call. She answered on the second ring. "Claire, you okay?" Her voice cracked something inside me, like a door opening. "I went to a family barbecue today," I said. I shouldn't have, but I did. And now there's this thing. What thing? A clearance form, my name's on it. She wants me to sign, says she needs me to be her sponsor, and Jazz, I can't do it, I can't. There was silence on the other end. Then, slow down. Who's she? My sister, Maddie. She's trying to get into some kind of CIA fellowship, and somehow I'm involved. I could hear Jasmine clicking something on her keyboard. And you had no idea until today? No, I didn't even know she'd applied. And I don't know why my name's in it. I'm barely holding my own life together. I've been invisible to them for years, and now this is the one thing they come to me for. Send me a picture, Jasmine said. I snapped a photo of the front page and waited. She whistled low. Claire, if your name is already in their system as a sponsor, someone either filled out paperwork on your behalf or forged your involvement. Neither is good. If you sign anything without knowing exactly what it means, you're responsible for everything that comes after. I swallowed. My apartment felt smaller. You're telling me I could be in trouble for this even though I didn't do anything? Yes, she said flatly. You don't get to be passive with stuff like this. If you stay quiet, you're part of it. That's the law. I thought about Dad standing behind that grill, the way his eyes skimmed past me like I was nothing more than a folding chair in the corner. I thought about Maddie's voice, sweet as sugar, saying, some of us keep moving forward. Jazz, I whispered. I didn't even want to go today. I just wanted to see if anything had changed. I know, she said softly. But listen, if you dig into this, you're going to find things you may not like. Are you ready for what comes with that? Her question hung in the room like the weight of the air before a thunderstorm. I stared at the envelope again. The apartment was quiet except for the low hum of the fridge. My hands were shaking, but I placed the phone against my ear and said, I'm ready. Even though every part of me wanted to crawl back under the blanket of the life I'd made here, the words felt like the first true thing I'd said in a long time. The last time I came into D.C., I was wearing a uniform, boots shining, my back straight as a flagpole. This time, there was no uniform to hide behind, only me, a wrinkled shirt, a worn-out notebook, and the weight of my own name hanging over everything. The train rocked a little as it slowed toward Union Station, and the skyline came into view. Those gray marble buildings I used to think belonged to someone else's life. Jasmine sat across from me, her elbow leaning against the window, her phone in her lap. She hadn't said much since we left Richmond, except once, when the trees blurred past and she reminded me, once we open this, you can't close it. I'd nodded then. I nodded again now, even though she wasn't looking at me. We walked the 10 blocks to Meera Patel's building. It was one of those brick walk-ups that might have been beautiful in 1940, but now the mortar had cracked and the stairs creaked. A loud siren passed somewhere in the distance, and the summer air clung to my neck like a wet towel. I thought about turning around more than once. Meera met us at the door. She was small, with dark hair pulled back in a hasty bun, her eyes darting like a bird's. She looked at Jasmine first, then at me, and for a moment, I didn't think she'd let us in. Are you sure? She whispered to Jasmine. Jasmine nodded. She has to see it. Reluctantly, Meera stepped aside and we climbed up into her studio. The place was cramped, stacks of paper everywhere, a fan humming in the corner. Outside the window, the city roared. Car horns, snippets of voices, a bus groaning as it stopped. But in here, everything was still, like a bubble. I stood in the doorway while Meera paced. I kept everything, she said finally. I couldn't throw it away. Even after I left, I just couldn't. Left what? I asked. She rubbed her palms on her jeans and looked at Jasmine instead of me. I used to be an accountant in a consulting firm your father hired. I processed documents for grants, scholarships, all kinds of applications. And your name, Claire, it kept showing up. Every year, a new file, sometimes for tax credits, sometimes for security clearance support, always with your signature, even when you weren't there. I felt like I'd been dropped into cold water. I never signed any of it, I said. I know, Meera said softly. That's why I kept the copies. She crossed the room and pulled open a drawer, rifling through folders until she found a small black USB drive. She held it out with trembling fingers. Everything is on here, she said. Emails, scanned forms, approvals. It goes back to 2015. Your father is very thorough. He used your military clearance as a shortcut. Grants that required a veteran sponsor? He signed your name. Maddie's applications for fellowships. Your name gave her instant credibility. You were like a skeleton key. Jasmine took the drive from her. Why are you giving this to us now? Because I can't sleep anymore, Mira whispered. And because she's about to get into something big, CIA big. If you don't stop it now, there's no undoing it later. I sat down on the edge of her couch, my knees suddenly weak. Why didn't you say something sooner? I tried, Mira said, her voice breaking. I told your father it was wrong. He said it was family business. And then one day, he told me my services weren't needed anymore. I was let go. The room tilted for a moment. I steadied myself by staring at the scuffed coffee table, at the little scratches in the wood that someone had tried to buff out but couldn't. Jasmine pulled out her laptop and plugged in the USB. Mira perched on the arm of a chair, wringing her hands. I scooted closer as the files popped up on the screen. There were hundreds, maybe thousands. Jasmine clicked open one from 2016, a scholarship form, my name at the bottom. 2017, a grant application. 2018, a loan. Every single document had my name, as if I'd been everywhere with them, as if I'd been the one pushing Maddie forward when I'd been miles away, invisible, trying to figure out who I was after the military. And then there it was, 2023, Maddie's fellowship application, a scanned page with my full name written in neat letters on the sponsor line. I didn't remember the first tear that rolled down my face. I only noticed when it hit my hand, leaving a dark mark on my notebook. I looked up at Jasmine. Her jaw was tight, but her hand rested gently on the back of my shoulder. You see now, Mira said, almost apologetic. This isn't just a mistake, it's a pattern. They've been using you for years. I couldn't look at her. Couldn't look at anyone. My entire body felt hollow, like someone had taken out all the pieces and left only the shell. The city noise outside kept moving, people laughing, buses braking, the steady hum of traffic. But inside Mira's small apartment, time just stopped. I closed the laptop carefully, like shutting a door. I stared at the plain lid for a long time before I said, "This ends now." My voice came out calm, almost gentle, but inside, a storm was forming. The cafe smelled like polished brass and money. Even before I stepped in, I could tell the marble tables had been wiped so many times they had forgotten how to be warm. My reflection flashed in the glass of the front door, and I almost didn't recognize myself. Tired eyes, a plain shirt, hair pulled back in a way that said I hadn't been trying to impress anyone for a long while. He was already there, my father, Richard Dawson. Sitting straight, navy blazer, silver hair in perfect order, reading something on his phone like a man who had never once worried about running out of time. I stopped just a few feet away and felt the memory of Mira's files pressing at me like a hand between my shoulder blades. Every page, every fake signature. My name turned into a tool. Jasmine had chosen a table across the room, her back to the window, her phone already in record mode, though she pretended to scroll. She gave me the smallest nod. I took a deep breath and walked to him. "Dad," I said. "Claire," he answered, standing to kiss my cheek. He smelled of expensive cologne, the same scent that used to cling to his suits when I was little. "You look good." I didn't, but I let the words hang there. The waiter came and I ordered a black coffee. Small talk, what traffic was like, how the weather had been unusually warm, lasted about 3 minutes. Then I slid the manila folder from my bag and placed it between us. "What's this?" he asked, still smiling. "Proof," I said. He didn't touch it at first. He just looked at me with that careful, neutral expression he'd worn my entire life. "I know about the forms, Dad," I said, my voice low. "Mira kept everything. Every time you used my name, my clearance, my record. It's all here." His fingers twitched toward the folder, then stopped. And in that moment, my mind slid backward to a Thanksgiving years ago. The house had smelled like turkey and sage, the kind of smell that coated your skin. I'd been standing at the kitchen island stirring gravy while Maddie sat in the living room with Mom talking about her college exams. Dad came in, humming, a stack of papers in his hand. "Sweetheart, could you just sign this real quick?" he said, sliding the paper toward me over the cutting board. What is it? Just a formality for a veterans community program, he said, kissing the top of my head like a punctuation mark. I signed. I didn't ask. I wanted to believe he needed me. Back in the cafe, my throat tightened. Did you ever see me as anything but a formality? I asked. His brows rose in mock surprise. You're being dramatic. I pushed the folder closer, flipping it open so he could see my handwriting printed, scanned, and duplicated hundreds of times. This isn't dramatic, it's illegal, I said. He chuckled softly. Claire, you don't understand how these things work. It's just family, helping family. These doors open for Maddie because of who we are. And just like that, another memory surged, uninvited. A Saturday when I was 9, a soccer field just outside town. The air smelled like grass and sunburned skin. I was out there at midfield, the ball rolling slowly toward me, while my father stood on the sidelines shouting, Go, Maddie! Run, Maddie! My sister was 5 years younger, too small to play, but she was the one he saw. I'd stopped running for a second that day, just long enough to see him, and in that pause, someone else took the ball. All these years, I whispered now, was I a daughter to you or just a clearance profile? Richard sighed as if he were tired of this game. Why do you insist on digging up old grudges? What do you think families do, Claire? We open doors for each other. And you... He leaned in slightly, his voice a notch lower, the smile gone from his eyes. You were convenient. That's all. A convenient name, a convenient service record. That's how the world works. For a second, the room blurred. Not because I was crying. I wasn't. But because all those years of trying to earn a spot at the table suddenly collapsed into a single truth. I had never been at the table at all. Convenient, I repeated. Stop acting like this is betrayal, he said. You've always been so sensitive. My father, sitting there with his neat cufflinks and perfect blazer, talking about me as though I was an extra key on a ring he could toss away when he didn't need me anymore. I reached for the folder, gathered the papers neatly, tucking them back inside. Thanks, I said, standing. For what? For the confession. He reached for his coffee then, but his hand froze halfway. I slung my bag over my shoulder and walked out. My legs felt both heavy and light at the same time. The sound of the espresso machine hissed behind me. Someone laughed at another table. Life went on, as if nothing had happened. Jasmine stood up quietly and followed me out into the sharp September sunlight. Outside, the city was buzzing, horns, footsteps, tourists pointing at domed buildings, but for me, everything had gone silent. I didn't look back at the cafe. The Department of Justice building was colder than I had imagined. It wasn't just the temperature, it was in the air, like judgment that had seeped into the walls. The marble floors echoed every footstep, making me feel exposed long before anyone had spoken my name. Jasmine walked beside me, her steps steady. She didn't talk, just held the strap of her briefcase tighter. When we stopped at the security line, she finally whispered, Once this starts, there's no pause button. I nodded because words wouldn't come. Inside the tribunal room, the air was even heavier. Fluorescent lights hummed faintly overhead, and the wood-paneled walls gave the illusion of warmth. But it was all surface. A long table stretched in front of us, a panel of officials sitting straight-backed, each with a nameplate. To one side, there was a row of chairs for witnesses. Richard was already there, perfect posture, suit pressed within an inch of its life. Maddie sat 2 seats away from him, hands clasped in her lap so tightly I could see the knuckles whitening even from across the room. Her eyes darted toward me once, then away. Meera Patel was in the back corner, shoulders hunched, looking like someone who wanted to vanish into the wood. When they called my name, my throat tightened. I glanced at Jasmine. She gave a single, calm nod. I took my seat. The first testimony came from Meera. Her voice wavered when she began, but by the time she reached the second page of her statement, she was steady. She told them about the pressure. How, starting in 2015, Richard Dawson had leaned on her to file routine sponsorship forms using my military credentials, without my consent, to push through federal grants and security applications. The panel asked questions, dates, locations, people present, and Meera answered every single one. Each time she said Claire Dawson's name was attached, I felt a strange mix of vindication and grief twist in my chest. Her testimony laid out the timeline like a staircase: 2015 Thanksgiving, 2017 Fellowship Program, 2019 grant applications, 2021 summer clearance updates, all signed, all stamped with my name, none of them mine. The DOJ staff set a stack of exhibits on the table: documents, emails, scanned forms. I could see the blue ink of my signature, only it wasn't mine. The smell of coffee drifted faintly from the hallway, and I realized I hadn't had any breakfast. My stomach clenched as the panel called Maddie. Maddie stood slowly, as though the act of rising weighed 50 pounds. She tucked her hair behind her ear and faced the panel. Her voice was quiet at first. "My father, he said it was standard," she began. "He would hand me forms and tell me to sign where he pointed. I didn't read them." Her voice cracked. I thought it was just paperwork for internships, for scholarships. He said he was proud of me. That was how doors opened. I didn't know Claire's name was being used this way. I swear I didn't know." The room was so quiet I could hear the sound of a pen scratching on paper somewhere behind me. When she looked at me then, it wasn't defiance. It was an apology. A silent one, maybe too late, but I felt it all the same. Richard's turn came. He stood, buttoning his jacket with that same smooth motion I'd seen my whole life. When he spoke, it was with a calm authority that had probably gotten him out of countless tight corners. "This is a misunderstanding," he said. "Family matters have been blown out of proportion. I never intended harm. It was simply a matter of expediency. We all know how slow the system can be." One of the panelists leaned forward. "Mr. Dawson, we are not here to discuss slow systems. We are here to discuss fraudulent use of federal security clearance credentials. Do you deny using your daughter's name and military record without consent?" He smiled faintly, as if to say the panel didn't quite grasp how the world worked. "I deny any malicious intent. This was family business." Jasmine raised a hand, requesting permission to present evidence. The lead panelist nodded. She pressed play on a small recorder, and suddenly my father's voice filled the room. The conversation from the cafe poured out over the speakers, clear as glass. "You were convenient. That's what families do. We open doors for each other." The words hung there, heavier than the wood-paneled walls, heavier than the fluorescent lights. I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes on the table, but I could feel him shift, the confident posture faltering. One of the panelists repeated, "Convenient," almost to himself, then wrote something down. "Do you have any explanation for that, Mr. Dawson?" another panelist asked. Richard opened his mouth, closed it, then glanced at Maddie. For the first time in my life, I saw him unsure of himself. "No further explanation," he said finally, voice low. The panel conferred briefly among themselves. I sat very still, my hands folded in my lap, listening to the sound of papers shuffling. In the row behind me, someone coughed. From the hallway came the faint click of a camera shutter. The whole building seemed to be holding its breath. Then the lead panelist spoke. "Given the testimony, documentation, and recorded admission, this matter moves to criminal referral." 2 U.S. Marshals stepped forward. The scrape of their shoes on the polished floor sounded final. Maddie crumpled into her chair, silent tears streaking her face. I felt no victory at that moment, just a kind of quiet exhaustion, like finishing a marathon on knees that had nearly given out. Richard didn't look at me as the marshals guided him aside. As the panel adjourned, I stayed in my seat. People filed out, the wood-paneled room growing emptier by the minute. Jasmine touched my arm gently, grounding me in the present. Outside, the autumn air smelled faintly of rain on concrete. We had done it. But as I stepped down the DOJ steps, I knew this wasn't the end. Not for Maddie, not for me. There were years of scars left to sort through. And yet, for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had stopped being invisible. By January, the city noise was behind me. There were no sirens, no hurried conversations, no polished marble halls, just the sound of wind pushing through pine trees, a low, steady breath that seemed to come from the mountain itself. The cabin sat at the end of a winding gravel drive, tucked so far back in the Blue Ridge foothills that even phone service gave up. The first time Noah and I stepped onto the porch, the boards creaked under our boots, and the smell of old cedar rose up like it had been waiting for someone to open the door again. Inside, it wasn't much. A narrow wood stove, a sagging couch, a table scarred with rings left by coffee cups, but it was mine. We spent the first week fixing what could be fixed. Noah didn't ask for explanations, and I didn't offer any. That was the way with him. In the mornings, we walked out to the shed and pulled out tools, him humming off key while I held board steady. By the afternoons, we were hauling wood, sealing the drafty windows with foam strips, laughing sometimes when a nail bent the wrong way. It felt like a different kind of rebuilding, quiet and deliberate, not rushed like the rest of my life had been. At night, after he drove back down the mountain, I would sit by the stove with a mug of instant coffee, listening to the logs crackle. There was space here for the things I hadn't been able to feel in years. The first letter came on a Thursday. I found it in the small mailbox at the end of the drive, the paper soft from the cold, my name written in Maddie's handwriting. Back inside, I sat at the table for a long time just looking at it. When I opened it, the words were short. Claire, I now understand. Nothing more, no excuses, no explanations. For a few minutes, I held it between my hands, staring at the ink. The handwriting was familiar, looping, neat, a little heavier on the downstrokes, just like it had been on birthday cards when we were kids. Then I folded the letter, walked out to the fire pit Noah had built with flat stones, and struck a match. The paper curled at the edges as soon as the flame caught. It folded inward, turning black, then gray, then nothing. I stood there until the last bit of ash lifted away in the wind. It wasn't anger that made me burn it. It was release. All those years I had carried a weight I didn't have words for. That day, watching the paper vanish, I realized it didn't need to live in me anymore. I wasn't running from my family. I just wasn't standing in the shadow they had built. That evening, I cleared the table. Noah had helped me bring in an old chair from the porch. Its paint was chipped and flaking, but it was sturdy. I set out a pen, a lamp, and a stack of clean forms I had printed myself, in my own name. The top page was an application for a veterans education grant. For the first time in years, my name sat on a line without anyone else hovering over my shoulder, without anyone waiting to use it as a shortcut. I picked up the pen. It surprised me how steady my hand was. The motion was simple, my name written in my own handwriting, curling across the page. It wasn't the signature itself that felt like a victory. It was the act. For so long, my name had been borrowed, taken, bent into something useful for someone else. This time, it was mine. I placed the pen down and sat there, listening to the quiet. The cabin was still. Outside, the snow fell softly against the window. Somewhere in the woods, a single branch cracked under its own weight, and then the forest was silent again. I let my breath out slowly. This time, the silence was mine. In the weeks that followed, the routine settled around me like a well-worn coat. Mornings with strong coffee, afternoons fixing small things that still needed work, evenings spent reading books I had never had time for before. The nightmares came less often. The tension in my shoulders loosened a little more every day. And sometimes, when the wind rushed through the trees just right, I could almost hear the echoes of that barbecue from months ago, the laughter, the toasts, the way my name hadn't been spoken once. Only now the sound felt hollow, like a recording from a different life. It no longer bound me. One morning in late February, I stood on the porch with a steaming mug in my hand. The sky stretched open above the blue ridge, pale gold at the edges where the sun was just starting to climb. I thought of all the things ahead. The grant application, classes, maybe even a future that didn't have to be shaped by anyone else's choices. I wrapped both hands around the mug and smiled to myself. For the first time in years, I could see a horizon that was mine to walk toward, and I stepped forward to meet it. When I set the pen down that day in the cabin, it felt like laying down a weight I'd carried all my life. Out there, where the wind moves through the pines and the snow hushes everything, I finally heard my own name without anyone else speaking over it. What I've learned is simple. Family can lift you, but it can also blind you if love turns into possession. Sometimes the hardest thing is choosing to stand on your own feet, even when that means walking away from the voices you grew up with. In this life, forgiveness is a gentle thing. We can hold people in our hearts without letting them hold us back. If this story stirred something in you, I'd love to hear what it reminded you of. Maybe it's time we all told a little more truth around our own family tables. If this story stayed with you, if something in it echoed your own experience, don't keep it quiet. Leave a comment, share your thoughts, or just let me know. Have you ever had to reclaim your name from the people who said they loved you? Because sometimes the hardest kind of healing starts with finally being heard. I'm listening. Are you ready to speak?